Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care.
Corporal Ethan Hayes stepped out of the spacecraft, squinting as he took in the view of Velithar. The planet was rugged, wild, and hostile, its skies tinted with an unusual shade of violet, casting an otherworldly glow over everything. As he adjusted his visor, he felt an inexplicable thrill. This was what he'd been waiting for. After years of service, he'd finally been assigned to the frontier, where humanity's military and research outpost was still freshly established. The Gorak-Na were a mysterious, formidable species, spoken about with both awe and caution. Towering and resilient, their warriors were rarely seen up close by humans, and those who did have a chance to observe them often reported back with a mix of admiration and intimidation. To Ethan, though, they were a mystery worth unraveling. He joined his squad near the camp perimeter, greeting his comrades with a casual nod. Each soldier was decked out in specialized armor designed to handle Velithar's harsh elements. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Marlowe, was briefing them on patrol schedules and security protocols, her voice sharp and precise. Ethan's friend, Private Davis, nudged him with a smirk. "So, Corporal, ready to come face to face with the giants?" he teased. "Bet they could crush you like a bug." Ethan shrugged, grinning back. "Guess I'll just have to win them over with my charm," he replied, feigning confidence. But he was genuinely curious about the Gorak-Na. He'd read everything he could about them, and something about their isolated, tribal existence fascinated him. Just as Marlowe finished the briefing, an alert came through their communicators. A distress signal had been picked up not far from their perimeter, near the edge of Gorak-Na territory. There were whispers that some soldiers had gotten too close to their borders recently, violating the unspoken rules that both species seemed to follow. Tensions between humans and Gorak-Na were on the rise, and Lieutenant Marlowe ordered Ethan's squad to investigate with caution. As they geared up, Davis muttered, "Can't believe they're sending us this close to Gorak-Na territory. Command better hope they're not itching for a fight." Ethan's curiosity only deepened. He had a strange feeling about this mission, one that both intrigued and unsettled him. As they began the trek towards the signal, he couldn't shake the sense that his life was about to change in ways he could hardly imagine. The landscape grew denser and stranger as Ethan's squad ventured closer to the border of Gorak-Na territory. Large, twisted trees loomed overhead, and unfamiliar, phosphorescent plants glowed faintly in the dim violet light. As they moved deeper, the unease among the squad members was palpable, and they exchanged wary glances. Davis muttered under his breath, but Ethan stayed focused, his eyes scanning for any signs of life or danger. Suddenly, the communicator on Ethan's wrist crackled to life. "We've located the distress signal source," came Lieutenant Marlowe's voice. "It's about 100 meters to the north, past the ravine. Stay alert." As the squad approached, Ethan spotted what appeared to be an enormous figure slumped against a fallen tree. Dark blue skin, armored with thick scales and faintly glowing tattoos, identified the being as Gorak-Na. The warrior was a giantess, around 8 feet tall, her frame muscular yet graceful, with long, dark hair braided with ornate beads. She appeared to be injured, blood seeping from a wound on her arm and leg. Lieutenant Marlowe motioned for them to approach cautiously, her hand gripping her weapon. "Stay on guard," she whispered. "We don't know what's waiting for us." Ethan, however, couldn't look away from the giantess. He saw her struggling to keep herself upright, eyes sharp with defiance despite her injuries. Against his better judgment, he moved a step closer, catching her gaze. A jolt ran through him as he met her eyes, intense, wary, yet not without a flicker of curiosity. The squad stood at a distance, uncertain, but Ethan took another step forward, and then another, his hands held up in a gesture of peace. He could feel Marlowe's glare on his back, but he ignored it. Something told him that this was more than just an enemy encounter. The giantess, visibly weakened, raised her arm as if to ward him off, but Ethan stopped a few feet away, kneeling down to her level. "I'm here to help," he said softly, though he wasn't sure she understood. Her gaze narrowed, and her jaw clenched, but she didn't move to attack. Ethan slowly reached into his pack, pulling out a basic medical kit, hoping the gesture would convey his intentions. The giantess eyed the kit, then him, seemingly torn between pride and her own pain. Finally, she nodded ever so slightly, allowing him to approach closer. With cautious, gentle movements, Ethan cleaned the wound on her arm. The touch seemed to surprise her. She flinched but held still, watching him closely. Ethan could feel her sharp gaze studying him, and he was struck by how her stoic expression belied a deep resilience. Her presence was powerful, and her silence spoke volumes. He noticed the faint symbols inked along her arm, beautiful yet enigmatic. He tried to make small talk, unsure if she'd understand, but he felt compelled to break the silence. "I'm Ethan," he offered quietly. "Corporal Ethan Hayes. Weird explorers here." The giantess tilted her head slightly, her gaze softening a fraction. Her lips parted, and in a rough, accented tone, she replied, "Kayla. I am Kayla." The brief introduction felt like a monumental breakthrough to Ethan. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It's an honor, Kayla," he said earnestly. Her expression was unreadable, yet she didn't seem entirely closed off. After tending to her wounds, Ethan stepped back, sensing she needed space. Kayla straightened, attempting to rise on her own. Instinctively, Ethan reached out to support her, and she allowed it, albeit with hesitation. The rest of the squad watched in uneasy silence, unsure whether to intervene. As Ethan helped Kayla to her feet, she gave him a long, appraising look, as if weighing his character. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough but steady. "Human, you should not be here, yet you show mercy." Ethan met her gaze, nodding solemnly. "Maybe we have more in common than we thought." Kayla's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, a faint glimmer of intrigue in them. This was a tentative first step, but something told Ethan it was the start of a connection deeper than any of them could understand. With Kayla's weight partially on him, Ethan helped her navigate the rugged path. His squad trailed behind, whispering among themselves. He could feel their eyes on him, the unspoken questions lingering in the air, but he focused solely on Kayla, sensing the effort it took for her to accept his assistance. Their progress was slow, each step a test of trust. Ethan found himself marveling at her resilience. Despite her injuries, Kayla held her head high, her pride unbroken. When they finally reached a clearing, she gestured for him to stop, her voice a low command. "Here is safe." Ethan reluctantly let her go. Stepping back, Kayla leaned against a tree, breathing heavily, but with a determination that intrigued him. She began to speak, though the words were halting, as if human language didn't come easily to her. "Why you help?" Ethan considered his answer carefully, not wanting to come across as patronizing. "I saw you were hurt. Helping is what we do. At least, it's what I try to do." Kayla studied him, her gaze as sharp as a blade. Gorak Na do not ask for help from outsiders. Strong must survive alone. Ethan frowned, sensing the weight of her words. "Strength doesn't mean being alone," he replied quietly. "Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept help." A flash of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps curiosity, crossed Kayla's face. For a moment, the cultural gap between them seemed smaller, bridged by a shared understanding. She nodded slowly, as though processing this unfamiliar idea. Ethan decided to press on, taking a seat on a nearby rock, showing he wasn't in a hurry to leave. "Can you tell me more about your people?" he asked carefully. "I've heard stories, but I want to understand." Kayla's gaze turned distant, and after a pause, she spoke in a slow, measured tone. "Gorak Na are born to strength, to loyalty. Every scar, every wound, it is our history, written on skin. We fight to protect the tribe. Alone we are strong, but together we are unbreakable." Ethan nodded, taking in her words with genuine interest. "That's powerful. For us humans, it's different. We rely on each other. There's strength in that too. But we're always trying to prove ourselves, to each other, to ourselves." Kayla watched him closely, her eyes reflecting the violet sky above. "Then you fight for acceptance too?" Her question was unexpectedly vulnerable, and it struck Ethan that perhaps she saw herself in his words. He smiled gently. "Yeah, I think we do." A silence fell between them, heavy with understanding. Ethan felt a strange warmth, a feeling of kinship that transcended species and language. He wanted to reach out, to solidify the connection in some tangible way, but he knew such gestures might be misunderstood. Instead, he settled for a small nod, a sign of respect. Kayla returned the nod. Her expression softened. Perhaps human is not so different from Gorak-Na. They shared a moment of quiet companionship, each one surprised by the ease between them. Kayla's reserved strength and dignity commanded Ethan's respect, and he could tell that his sincerity had earned a measure of hers. After a moment, Kayla shifted slightly, her gaze thoughtful. Among Gorak-Na, there is a ritual, a bond. It is ancient, a joining of spirits, of strength and heart. Few are chosen. Ethan's curiosity piqued, and he leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "What does it mean to bond?" Kayla's eyes gleamed with reverence as she explained. "The bond is more than tradition. It is a promise, unbreakable. Those who bond become one, sharing life, strength, and purpose. It is sacred." The reverence in her voice sent a thrill down Ethan's spine. It was clear that the bond was something deeply respected among her people, an honor that went beyond any human equivalent. He found himself drawn to the idea, not just out of curiosity, but with a deep-seated admiration. He hesitated before speaking, feeling the weight of the moment. And could a human and a Gorak-Na bond? Kayla's expression grew serious, as though he had touched upon something profound and uncertain. "It has never been done," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But if both hearts are strong, perhaps." The implication of her words hung in the air, stirring something deep within Ethan. It was a powerful thought, a connection that bridged not only two beings, but two worlds. His heartbeat quickened, and he felt an odd but undeniable pull toward this enigmatic giantess before him. Kayla met his gaze, her eyes challenging yet open. She was studying him, as though trying to measure the strength of his spirit. Ethan held her gaze, unflinching, feeling a strange, unspoken promise form between them. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Kayla's mouth, as though she understood the enormity of what they had begun. In that moment, neither of them knew where this path would lead, but they both sensed that something extraordinary had begun. As they made their way back to the human base's outskirts, the sun began setting, casting an eerie glow over Velithar's rugged landscape. Ethan helped Kayla find a secluded spot near the border of Gorak-Na territory, where she could rest. They exchanged a quiet farewell, her fingers briefly brushing against his in a way that conveyed more than words could. Ethan felt the gesture linger even after he walked away. Back at camp, his squad was already abuzz with gossip about his reckless approach toward a Gorak-Na giant. Lieutenant Marlowe eyed him as he entered the base, her expression unreadable. But before Ethan could settle, he was called to her office. Seated across from Marlowe's steely gaze, Ethan kept his expression neutral, waiting for the inevitable reprimand. Marlowe folded her arms, studying him carefully. "So, Corporal Hayes, you think it was wise to cozy up with one of them?" Her tone was harsh, though tinged with an unspoken worry. Ethan straightened his posture. "Lieutenant Kayla, she wasn't a threat. She was injured. Helping her showed our good faith. It might bridge some of the gaps between us." Marlowe's frown deepened. "And who authorized this bond, Hayes? If the Gorak-Na think we're crossing into their affairs, it could spark conflict." Ethan held her gaze, unwilling to back down. "Lieutenant, we're here as much to understand as we are to protect. If there's a chance to find common ground, shouldn't we try?" A tense silence settled between them before Marlowe sighed, frustration warring with reluctant respect. "You've always had that bleeding heart of yours, but don't let it cloud your judgment, Hayes. We don't know what the Gorak-Na want with us, or if they can be trusted." Ethan left the office with Marlowe's warning echoing in his mind, but his heart was resolute. His encounter with Kayla had been real, genuine, and it had only strengthened his resolve to build something beyond fear and suspicion. Meanwhile, Kayla's return to her people was met with its own scrutiny. She limped into the Gorak-Na encampment, her wounds bandaged by human hands, which didn't go unnoticed by her fellow warriors. The clan's leader, Chief Raller, a towering figure with piercing eyes, approached her with a look of disapproval. "Kayla," he rumbled, his voice a force unto itself. "You return, tended by a human? What has happened?" Kayla met his gaze, her shoulders squared despite her exhaustion. "The human soldier helped me when I was injured. His kindness is not weakness." Raller scowled, his features hardening. "The humans are outsiders. They do not belong in our ways, nor can they understand them." Kayla's chin lifted defiantly. "Perhaps it is time to change that. This one." Ethan showed strength and mercy. "He asked nothing of me in return." The clan members murmured among themselves, some intrigued, others unsettled. Raller, however, shook his head. "The bond, Kayla, is sacred. Do not let an outsider taint what is pure." Kayla's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. If the bond is true, it cannot be tainted. And if this human proves himself worthy, who are we to deny it? Her words hung in the air, challenging the traditional beliefs that held the Gorak-Na together. Raller's frown deepened, and he issued a final warning. "Choose wisely, Kayla. The clan will not tolerate weakness or betrayal." Days passed, and despite their responsibilities, both Ethan and Kayla found ways to meet at the border, each encounter strengthening their connection. But tensions grew within both camps. Ethan's fellow soldiers viewed his actions with skepticism, some even voicing concerns that he was jeopardizing their mission. And within the Gorak-Na, whispers of betrayal began to surround Kayla. Their bond, tentative and new, was already facing the weight of centuries-old customs and suspicions. Yet, both Ethan and Kayla understood that if they wanted to pursue this connection, they would need to take a stand, to make sacrifices for the chance of unity. During one such clandestine meeting, Kayla's expression was troubled, a shadow of worry flickering in her eyes. She told Ethan of the chief's disapproval, of the clan's doubts. Her voice was steady, but he could see the pain beneath her calm exterior. Ethan, reaching out, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're risking a lot for this for me," he admitted quietly. Kayla looked up at him, her gaze fierce yet tender. "In our world, we are taught to fight for what matters, and I believe you matter." Her words struck Ethan with a force he hadn't anticipated. A soft but powerful vow lingered between them, unspoken yet undeniable. They both knew that pursuing this bond was no longer just a curiosity or a desire. It was a declaration. As they parted, Ethan knew it was time to make a choice. He could continue as a soldier, staying loyal to his people, but distancing himself from Kayla, or he could take the risk, venturing into uncharted territory by honoring the bond that had formed between them. The decision weighed heavily, yet he knew deep down that he couldn't abandon what he and Kayla had begun. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with her. Days after their last encounter, Ethan's thoughts were consumed by Kayla and the bond ritual she had spoken of. He sensed the growing divide between his loyalty to his people and his commitment to Kayla. The tension on both sides was mounting, and he knew it was only a matter of time before something, or someone, forced him to choose. His choice, however, became clear one evening when he received a message from Kayla. She had spoken with Chief Raller, and despite the chief's reservations, he had allowed her to challenge the human if he dared to prove his worth. There was no turning back. Kayla had taken a risk by advocating for their bond, and now it was up to Ethan to face the Gorak-Na trial. Ethan's heart raced as he made his way to the sacred grounds, deep within Gorak-Na territory. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and ancient earth, the atmosphere charged with tradition and expectation. A group of Gorak-Na warriors, clad in ceremonial garments, formed a circle around a stone altar, their eyes fixed on him as he approached. Standing beside the altar was Kayla, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. She wore traditional Gorak-Na armor adorned with intricate symbols, the glow of the tattoos on her arms more vibrant than ever. Seeing her like this, Ethan was struck by her strength, the power of her presence amplifying his own determination. As he stepped into the circle, Chief Raller addressed him, his voice resonating with authority. "Ethan Hayes, you have come to our sacred grounds to honor the bond, to prove your worth, You must face the trial of endurance. This is our test, a measure of heart, strength, and unity." Ethan's gaze remained steady, his voice firm as he replied, "I accept the trial. Whatever it takes, I'm ready." Rowler's sharp eyes assessed him, seeming to probe his spirit. "This bond is sacred. If you falter, you will bring dishonor upon Kayla and our people. Are you prepared to carry the weight of our trust?" Ethan's eyes shifted to Kayla, finding reassurance in her steady gaze. "I am," he replied, the weight of the commitment settling into his bones. The Gorak-Na warriors stepped forward, leading Ethan and Kayla to the edge of a cliff overlooking the river below. The trial of endurance was brutal. It required each participant to carry a heavy stone representing the weight of their bond up a steep incline, symbolizing the burdens shared by both partners in the bond. Only those with unwavering strength and loyalty could complete the ritual side by side. Ethan hoisted his stone, feeling the strain immediately as he began the climb. Beside him, Kayla moved with a powerful grace, her expression focused, yet filled with a fierce determination that inspired him to keep going. Step by step, they climbed, their breaths heavy, their muscles burning. Halfway up the incline, the stone grew heavier, testing Ethan's resolve. Sweat poured down his face as he glanced at Kayla, who nodded, silently urging him onward. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward. Each step felt like a battle, but he knew he was fighting for something far greater than himself. He was fighting for Kayla, for their bond, and for a future beyond the narrow lines drawn by their cultures. When they finally reached the top, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of relief and pride. They set their stones down together, and Kayla placed her hand over his, her touch warm and grounding. In that moment, surrounded by the watchful eyes of the Gorak-Na, they both knew they had proven themselves, not only to the clan but to each other. Rowler approached, his expression softened by a glimmer of respect. "You have endured," he said solemnly, addressing them both. "The bond is now yours to carry." As part of the ritual, he handed them each a piece of woven cloth, symbolizing their connection, a physical representation of the vow they had taken. Kayla wrapped hers around her arm, and Ethan followed suit, feeling the fabric bind him not just to her, but to her world. With the ritual completed, the Gorak-Na gathered to honor their new bondmates in a ceremony of acceptance. The warriors chanted ancient songs, filling the night with echoes of strength and unity. They shared a drink from a communal chalice, a symbol of trust that had been rarely extended to outsiders. Ethan found himself swept up in the emotion of the ceremony. Kayla's people, once wary and reserved, now welcomed him with cautious acceptance, their expressions softened by a recognition of his commitment. And as Kayla stood beside him, her pride and relief evident, Ethan realized he had found something he hadn't known he was searching for, a place of belonging, built on trust and shared strength. As the night deepened, Ethan and Kayla slipped away from the celebration to share a quiet moment by the river. The violet sky reflected in the water, casting an ethereal glow that illuminated Kayla's face. Ethan looked at her, his heart filled with gratitude and awe. "Thank you, Kayla," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "for trusting me, for letting me be a part of this." Kayla's expression softened, her voice equally tender. "Thank you for believing in something greater than what you know. You have shown a courage that few could understand." They sat in silence, content in each other's presence, each aware that the path ahead would not be easy. But together, they had proven their strength. In that moment, Ethan felt the weight of his bond to Kayla settle into place, solid and unbreakable, a promise, not just to her, but to the bridge they had begun to build between their worlds. After the bond ceremony, Ethan knew it was time to report back to the human base. He left Kayla with a solemn promise to meet again, his heart torn between his newfound connection with her and his duties as a soldier. The Gorak-Na had accepted him, but he had yet to face his superiors and the possible repercussions of his choices. As he approached the base, the familiar sounds and sights of human life felt distant, almost foreign. Ethan realized that part of him had changed irrevocably, bound to Kayla and her world in a way he hadn't anticipated. Not long after his return, Ethan was summoned to meet with Lieutenant Marlowe and Captain Rourke, the base's commanding officer. The tension was thick in the small briefing room as they questioned him about his time in Gorakna territory. Captain Rourke, a grizzled man with a stern demeanor, fixed Ethan with a hard stare. "Corporal Hayes, we've received word that you've been involved in a personal alliance with one of the Gorakna. Do you realize what kind of situation this puts us in?" Ethan met Rourke's gaze, determined to explain. "Sir, I've earned the Gorakna's trust. This alliance could be a bridge between us and them. The Gorakna are strong allies, and we've only just begun to understand their culture." Rourke scoffed, shaking his head. "This isn't about understanding, Hayes. This is about security. You've put us at risk by mingling with them. Our mission here is clear: secure our position, not fraternize with aliens." Lieutenant Marlowe's expression was a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Ethan, you've always had good instincts, but this time, it feels like you're choosing them over us. You're jeopardizing everything we've worked to establish." Ethan's jaw clenched. "With respect, sir, we're here to learn about this planet and its people, not just hold a defensive line. Building bonds with them can prevent the very conflicts we're here to avoid." But his words were met with silence, and he realized that, to them, his bond with Kayla represented an unpredictable threat rather than a valuable alliance. The more he defended his connection to her, the more isolated he felt, his loyalty to Kayla pulling him away from his allegiance to the base. Captain Rourke leaned forward, his tone cold. "You're to end this alliance immediately, Hayes. Report for reassignment tomorrow, and stay away from the Gorakna. This is a direct order." The command struck Ethan like a blow. He was torn, anger simmering beneath the surface as he grappled with his own sense of duty. The thought of betraying Kayla and the bond they had forged made his stomach twist, but he knew defying orders would have consequences. After a long silence, he saluted and left the room, his mind racing. His fellow soldiers' glances were suspicious as he passed, whispers trailing him, leaving him feeling more isolated than ever. Later that night, Ethan sought out Davis, his friend and fellow soldier. They sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking the base, the quiet hum of machinery in the background. Ethan recounted his experience with Kayla and the bond they had formed, the ritual, and the respect he had earned among the Gorakna. Davis listened intently, his usual humor replaced with a serious expression. "Man, I get it. I mean, maybe not all of it, but if she means that much to you, maybe you shouldn't give up on this so quickly." Ethan sighed, a heavy feeling pressing on his chest. "It's more than that, Davis. The bond isn't just between me and her. It's a commitment to her people as well. I can't just walk away." Davis placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you've got a decision to make, don't you? Either fight for it, or let it go and stay in line." Ethan nodded, appreciating his friend's honesty. The truth was painfully clear. He was at a crossroads, and whatever he chose would define his path forward. Determined to see her once more, Ethan slipped out of the base late that night, navigating through the shadowy woods to the river where they had often met. As he arrived, he saw Kayla standing by the water's edge, her figure illuminated by the starlight. She turned as he approached, her face a mixture of relief and anticipation. Without a word, she reached out, placing a hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "You are troubled," she observed, her voice calm but laced with concern. Ethan exhaled, the tension easing at her touch. "My superiors want me to end this, to stay away from you. They don't understand, and they don't want to." Kayla's gaze softened, and she nodded as though she had anticipated this. "Then perhaps this path is one you must walk alone. The bond demands strength, Ethan. Strength to choose even when the way is unclear." Her words struck him with a fierce clarity. In that moment, he realized that his loyalty to her, to their bond, was more powerful than any order or threat of consequence. He would not abandon her or the bond they had chosen to share. Ethan took her hands in his voice steady. "I don't care what they say. This is worth fighting for, Kayla. You are worth fighting for." A gentle smile spread across her face, pride and warmth in her eyes. "Then fight we shall," she murmured, tightening her grip on his hands. for a future neither of our people could imagine. As they stood together beneath the starlit sky, the enormity of their choice settled over them. It would be a difficult journey, fraught with risks and opposition from both sides. But in that moment, Ethan knew that he had found something worth defying the world for. Their bond was no longer just a personal connection. It was a bridge between worlds, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. The next morning, Ethan returned to the base, fully aware that his decision to maintain his bond with Kayla might be discovered. Tension permeated the air, and as he approached the base entrance, 2 soldiers intercepted him, their faces grim. Without a word, they escorted him directly to Lieutenant Marlowe's office. Inside, Marlowe's expression was tight with frustration, and beside her stood Captain Rourke, who looked at Ethan with palpable disdain. "You disobeyed a direct order, Corporal Hayes," Rourke began, his voice cold. "You chose that alien over your duty, over your people." Ethan straightened, meeting his captain's glare. "I made a choice to honor my commitment. Kayla and I were bonded now. It's something that goes beyond orders or rank." Rourke's expression hardened. "Then consider yourself dishonorably discharged, Hayes. Effective immediately. You are stripped of your rank and privileges. You're to leave the base within the hour." The words hit Ethan like a punch, but he stood his ground, pride filling his chest as he thought of Kayla and the bond they had forged. He had expected this outcome, and now, though painful, he knew he had chosen the path he was meant to walk. Word of his discharge spread quickly through the camp. As Ethan packed his few belongings, Davis approached, his face filled with both sympathy and admiration. "I don't know what's going to happen next, man," Davis said, offering him a firm handshake. "But I know you made the right call. You did something nobody else had the guts to do." Ethan smiled, appreciating the support. "Take care of yourself, Davis. And don't lose hope. There's more out here than what we're told to see." With a final nod, Ethan left the base, feeling both a sense of loss and liberation. He was no longer bound by military protocol. He was free to stand by Kayla without restraint. But as he made his way into the dense forest toward Gorakna territory, he couldn't shake the sense that his departure would only heighten tensions between the humans and the Gorakna. Ethan arrived at the Gorakna village, where Kayla waited for him with a mixture of relief and resolve. She had heard the news of his discharge and greeted him with a solemn expression. "You have chosen this path, Ethan, and I will walk it with you," she said, her voice unwavering. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. "I'm here because of us, because I believe in what we're building together. But there will be consequences. My people, they may not take this lightly." Kayla nodded, her gaze fierce. "Then we will stand together as the bond requires. The Gorakna will not abandon their own." Despite Kayla's assurance, Ethan noticed a growing unease among the Gorakna. Many of the warriors viewed his presence with suspicion, their loyalty to Kayla keeping them at bay, but their eyes wary. Rumors had circulated about his discharge, fueling fears that humans could retaliate in unpredictable ways. Chief Rowler had been observing quietly, allowing Ethan to stay, but withholding his full approval. One evening, Rowler called a gathering to address the concerns of his people. He stood before the Gorakna clan, his powerful voice carrying through the night air. "This human stands with us now, bound by the ancient right. But the question remains, will he protect us, or will he bring the wrath of his people upon our tribe?" Ethan stepped forward, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. He addressed the clan, his voice steady and sincere. "I chose to bond with Kayla because I believe in unity beyond borders. I cannot promise that my people won't interfere, but I promise I will stand with you and protect you, as I would protect her." Rowler considered his words, and after a tense silence, he nodded. "Then let your actions prove your loyalty. We will see if this bond is as strong as you claim." A few days later, as tension simmered on both sides, an explosion erupted near the edge of Gorakna territory. Human drones had breached their perimeter, dropping warning flares and small explosives in a clear attempt to provoke a response. The Gorakna warriors quickly gathered, rallying to protect their land, and Ethan found himself torn between trying to de-escalate the situation and standing ready to defend his new home. Kayla was by his side, her eyes filled with both anger and sorrow. "Your people seek to frighten us. They fear what they do not understand." Ethan felt a pang of shame, but he steadied himself. "I won't let this turn into war. If I can get close to their leader, maybe I can reason with them." Chief Raller, observing the destruction, looked to Ethan. "If you wish to protect us, then go. Speak to your people. Prove your words." Ethan made his way toward the human camp under the cover of night, knowing that he was likely viewed as a traitor by his former comrades. He managed to slip past the perimeter guards, heading straight to the command tent where Lieutenant Marlowe was in the middle of a heated discussion with Captain Rourke. Bursting into the tent, Ethan raised his hands to show he was unarmed. Marlowe's expression was a mixture of surprise and anger, while Rourke's face twisted in disgust. "You've got some nerve coming here, Hayes," he spat. Ethan held his ground. "You don't need to provoke them, Captain. They want peace as much as we do. The Gorakna aren't the enemy here. We don't need a war over something we don't understand." Rourke sneered. "You're blinded by that alien, Hayes. They're a threat, and we'll treat them as such until they're contained." Before Rourke could issue any orders, Marlowe interrupted. "Captain, perhaps we're misinterpreting their intentions. Maybe Hayes has a point. If we keep provoking them, we'll escalate a conflict we don't need." For a moment, tension crackled between them, the weight of Ethan's words hanging in the air. Rourke's face darkened, but he seemed to relent, his posture stiff. "Fine, but the second they step out of line, we'll be ready." Ethan returned to Kayla and the Gorakna with a fragile truce, warning them that any hint of aggression would shatter the peace. Chief Raller accepted the news, though he remained skeptical. The Gorakna knew well the importance of restraint but were prepared to defend their own if it came to it. In the quiet after the confrontation, Ethan and Kayla sat together beneath the stars, reflecting on the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. They had bought themselves time, but the danger still loomed. "We've made it through one battle," Kayla said softly, her hand resting over his. "But there will be more. Our path is one of hardship, but together we have strength." Ethan squeezed her hand, finding solace in her presence. "Whatever comes, we'll face it. We've come this far. I won't give up now." As they looked to the horizon, the quiet determination in their hearts grew stronger. They had chosen a path that bridged two worlds, and though the journey was fraught with risks, they knew they would walk it together, no matter what lay ahead. In the days following Ethan's return with the truce, the Gorakna camp remained alert but cautiously optimistic. Chief Raller allowed his warriors a tentative rest, while Kayla and Ethan shared moments of quiet hope, feeling that perhaps they had averted the worst. Ethan stayed vigilant, knowing the fragility of the peace. He and Kayla trained together, strengthening both their connection and their readiness. She taught him Gorakna defensive techniques, emphasizing coordination and unity, while he shared human tactics, showing her how adaptability could turn the tide in battle. Their mutual respect deepened as they continued to learn from each other. Despite the quiet, tensions continued to smolder. The humans, distrustful of the Gorakna, began testing the border once again with scouting drones, each incident worsening the situation. Ethan had begged his former comrades to cease these actions, but his warnings fell on deaf ears, and Captain Rourke remained intent on keeping the Gorakna contained. One afternoon, while Ethan and Kayla were scouting the border, they spotted a group of Gorakna hunters cornered by a team of human soldiers. The situation was tense, the humans shouting commands that the Gorakna didn't fully understand, their weapons aimed and fingers itching to pull the trigger. Ethan's heart raced as he realized how close they were to disaster. Ethan stepped forward, calling out to his former squad, "Hold your fire. These aren't combatants, they're hunters." But his words went unheeded as one of the Gorakna hunters, feeling threatened, lunged forward to defend his kin. The humans reacted instinctively, gunfire tearing through the air. When the smoke cleared, two Gorakna lay on the ground, their wounds fatal. Kayla fell to her knees beside them, her expression one of shock and grief as she recognized the fallen hunters. Ethan's own sorrow mirrored hers, but he could see the rage and anguish building in her eyes. The fragile truce had shattered. The news of the fallen spread quickly through the Gorakna camp, their warriors gathering with faces grim and filled with anger. Chief Rowler stood at the head of the gathering, his powerful voice echoing with fury. They come onto our lands. They shed the blood of our own. This insult cannot be ignored. Ethan felt the weight of their pain, yet he knew retaliation would only worsen the situation. He stepped forward, his voice steady. Please, Chief Rowler Kayla, I understand the anger, but if we respond with violence, we'll be seen as the threat they already think we are. There has to be another way. Rowler turned his gaze on Ethan. His eyes narrowed. You would defend them even now. Ethan shook his head. No, I defend peace. I'm asking for one more chance to show them that this doesn't have to end in bloodshed. A tense silence settled, and finally, Kayla spoke, her voice a mixture of sadness and determination. Ethan is right. If we become the aggressors, we lose everything we have worked for. But if they will not listen, we must prepare. Reluctantly, Rowler agreed. The Gorakna would wait, but they would defend themselves if humans breached their borders again. Determined to stop the conflict before it spiraled out of control, Ethan decided to confront Captain Rourke one last time. He returned to the human base under the watchful eyes of guards, his presence clearly unwelcome. Inside the command tent, Rourke looked at Ethan with barely concealed disdain. You're back again, Hayes. I thought we'd dealt with your treachery. Ethan kept his voice calm, though his anger simmered beneath the surface. Captain, you need to listen. 2 Gorakna were killed today because of our actions. This isn't just a mission anymore. It's a war waiting to happen. If we don't back down, both sides will lose more than we can imagine. Rourke sneered, unmoved. These aliens are a threat, and your weakness blinds you. They'll learn to stay in their place once we've made an example of them. Realizing words alone wouldn't sway him, Ethan made one final appeal to Marlowe. She looked torn, her loyalty divided between duty and the weight of Ethan's conviction. Captain, perhaps we should consider restraint. Escalating this could cost us control, more than we can manage. But Rourke dismissed her with a wave of his hand, issuing orders for another round of patrols near Gorakna territory. Ethan left the base defeated, his heart heavy with the knowledge that a confrontation was now inevitable. Ethan returned to Kayla, the resolve in his eyes mirroring her own. They won't listen. They're set on control, no matter the cost. We have to be ready. That night, as human patrols neared the Gorakna border, the warriors took their places, determined to defend their home. Ethan joined their ranks, his former uniform replaced with Gorakna armor, each piece symbolizing his allegiance and commitment to his bond with Kayla. The clash was swift and fierce, humans and Gorakna facing off in a storm of shouts, flashing weapons, and primal battle cries. Ethan fought alongside Kayla, their movements synchronized, a testament to the strength of their bond. Side by side, they defended each other, embodying the unity they had hoped to foster between their people. In the heat of battle, Ethan saw Captain Rourke, leading the human side with ruthless precision. Rourke's eyes locked onto Ethan, his face a mask of betrayal and rage. The captain raised his weapon, aiming it directly at him. As the gunshot rang out, Kayla threw herself in front of Ethan, her powerful frame absorbing the impact. She staggered but remained upright, determination flashing in her eyes. Ethan's heart pounded as he caught her, his anger flaring as he realized the lengths she would go to protect him. In a final surge of desperation, Ethan called out, his voice carrying across the battlefield. Enough! We are bound, human and Gorakna united. This war brings us nothing but loss. His words, filled with both anguish and conviction, echoed through the chaos, reaching the ears of soldiers on both sides. His former comrades hesitated, the weight of his plea sinking in as they watched him, standing arm in arm with Kayla, her loyalty and sacrifice evident. Slowly, the fighting ceased as Marlowe took command, ordering a retreat. She watched Ethan and Kayla with conflicted eyes, clearly torn by her loyalty to the mission and the growing understanding of the bond they shared. Finally, she signaled a ceasefire, and her soldiers pulled back, though distrust lingered in the air. Captain Rourke, seething, attempted to press forward, but Marlowe restrained him. "This has gone far enough, Captain," she said firmly. "We've seen their loyalty, and we've seen enough bloodshed." With a reluctant growl, Rourke backed down, his defeat evident. The humans retreated, leaving behind a battlefield littered with the memories of lives nearly lost. In the quiet that followed, Ethan turned to Kayla, his heart both relieved and sorrowful. They had survived, but at a heavy cost. Kayla reached out, taking his hand, and they exchanged a silent promise. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Chief Raller, observing the truce and the resolve between Ethan and Kayla, finally stepped forward, acknowledging Ethan with a nod of respect. "You have proven your strength, human. Our bond holds for now." As Ethan and Kayla stood together, hand in hand, they knew they had forged something new, something worth protecting. Their bond, now tempered by the fires of battle, had not only united them, but had sparked the beginnings of peace between two worlds. In that moment, Ethan understood that he had found his place, not as a soldier bound by orders, but as a bridge between cultures, between worlds. And as Kayla's hand tightened around his, he felt the unbreakable strength of the bond they shared, carrying them into an uncertain, yet hopeful future. As dawn broke over the rugged terrain of Velithar, the echoes of battle finally faded, leaving an uneasy silence. Ethan and Kayla stood together, surveying the area that had nearly become a graveyard for both humans and Gorak-Na. The weight of what they had endured and barely survived hung heavy between them. The Gorak-Na clan gathered in small groups, tending to their wounded, their expressions hardened by the losses, but softened by a newfound respect for Ethan. Among them, Kayla moved with a quiet authority, her presence a reassuring reminder of the bond that had saved them. Ethan glanced over to the human side, where Lieutenant Marlowe directed her soldiers to pack up and begin preparations for a return to base. She avoided his gaze, clearly torn between her duty and the realization that Ethan and Kayla's bond had been the key to preventing a far bloodier conflict. As Ethan approached Marlowe, she looked up, her expression unreadable. "You did something brave, Corporal, risking everything to stand by her." There was a pause before she added, "Maybe I underestimated what this bond could mean." Ethan nodded, gratitude softening his voice. "Thank you, Lieutenant, for seeing that there's more to this than orders and boundaries." Marlowe sighed, nodding reluctantly. "I'll be filing a report when we return. I'll recommend that further interaction with the Gorak-Na be pursued cautiously, but not with hostility. We have to start somewhere." With that, Marlowe gave them a final nod and turned to her troops, leading them away from the Gorak-Na territory. It was a tentative step, but one that left Ethan with a renewed hope that perhaps, just perhaps, both sides could learn to coexist. Back at the Gorak-Na village, Ethan joined Kayla as the clan gathered to discuss the battle's outcome and what it meant for their future. Chief Raller stood before his people, his eyes sweeping over the warriors, the elders, and finally resting on Ethan. "Today, a human stood among us as one of our own," Raller began, his deep voice carrying the weight of their ancient traditions. "He has proven his loyalty, not only to Kayla, but to all of us. Though we have known little of trust in outsiders, perhaps we must learn it anew." Raller turned to Ethan, extending his hand in a rare display of respect. Ethan stepped forward, accepting the gesture, feeling the solemn weight of the clan's trust settle on his shoulders. "Ethan Hayes, bonded to Kayla," Raller declared. "You are welcome among us, and may this bond stand as a bridge between our people." That evening, the Gorak-Na held a quiet celebration in honor of the peace. They sang ancient songs that spoke of loyalty, unity, and courage, their voices blending in a haunting, beautiful harmony. Kayla and Ethan sat together near the fire, their hands entwined, watching the flames dance as their people's voices rose into the night. Kayla looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and pride. "What we have started is only the beginning," she murmured. "But tonight we celebrate what we have already achieved." Ethan smiled, feeling the depth of their bond resonate in every beat of his heart. "Together, we've created something that I didn't even know was possible, and I wouldn't change a thing." They shared a quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the unity they had fought so hard to build. In that moment, Ethan felt truly at home. As the celebration wound down, Rowler approached Ethan and Kayla, presenting them with two intricately carved stones. Each stone bore the mark of the Gorak Na and the newly forged symbol of their bond, a unique design crafted by the clan's elders to represent unity across species. "These stones will be your guide," Rowler explained, his voice solemn. "They remind us of the strength in partnership, of bonds that surpass fear." Ethan accepted the stone with reverence, understanding its significance. Kayla held her stone close to her heart, her pride evident as she stood beside him. This gesture symbolized the acceptance of their union, an honor that solidified Ethan's place among the Gorak Na and marked their bond as something sacred. In the days that followed, Ethan and Kayla worked with the Gorak Na to establish a set of protocols for interactions with the humans. They planned exchanges of knowledge and resources, hoping to build on the tentative peace they had secured. Kayla became a trusted liaison, respected for her bond with Ethan and her commitment to the future of their people. Ethan's former position as a soldier was gone, but he found a new purpose within the Gorak Na community. He trained alongside them, learning their ways, adopting their values, and sharing his knowledge in return. His experience as a soldier gave him valuable insights, and together with Kayla, he began to outline strategies that would protect the Gorak Na from external threats while promoting understanding with the humans. Months passed, and the bond between Ethan and Kayla became a symbol of hope for both the humans and the Gorak Na. While tensions still simmered beneath the surface, the alliance they had forged proved resilient, paving the way for cooperation that neither side could have envisioned before. Ethan and Kayla's bond became a story told among the Gorak Na, of courage, love, and the strength to transcend differences. And among the humans, whispers of the soldier who bonded with the alien giant began to circulate, sparking curiosity and even admiration. In time, both the human and Gorak Na leaders acknowledged the potential for peace, however tentative. The process was slow, with many obstacles still to overcome, but it was a beginning. One evening, as they sat together beneath the violet sky, Ethan turned to Kayla, his heart full of gratitude for the path they had walked together. "I never thought my life would lead me here, Kayla," he said, his voice soft yet filled with conviction. "But I'm glad it did. I'm glad I found you." Kayla's gaze was warm, her hand resting over his. "Our journey has only just begun, Ethan, but with you by my side, I know we can face whatever comes." They sat together in silence, watching the stars twinkle above, each one a promise of the future they had created. Together, they had overcome hatred, broken the barriers of tradition, and united two worlds in a bond that would endure beyond them, a bond of hope, courage, and love. In that moment, Ethan knew that he had found his purpose, not as a soldier, but as a bridge between worlds, a partner to Kayla, and a symbol of peace that transcended boundaries. And as they looked to the future, their hearts beat as one, ready to face whatever